go here. People say, people been saying, you know.
Okay, I'll spot her. I wish. Right about that. I have a pen, Anne.
You do?
I think.
One of those guys that saw the people in his pocket.
They gotta learn. They gotta learn.
You want to keep it?
not bring any clothes?
Then
He forgot.
I can do one, but there again, it's really so confusing. Like college class.
I told, but he should have had the presence of mind to.
Throw my purse down where I'm staying.
You gotta be on the X-Men.
Oh.
Yeah. Can you get over to the X? Close to me. Okay, now, so this is did Winnie leave yet? Okay, Melissa. So ask Melissa, can he go? Blah 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 blah. And tell him if he can get a pair of clothes and take a shower instead of going over there like sweaty. And his house, and I can pick him up in the All right, bye.
Check, check, check. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Sound check. 1, 2, 3. Hey, hey.
No, I told him, I said, look, man, I apologize for popping off like that. I said, but I said, back to the administration already. So what you're telling me is you have 10%, which now is back, and I didn't allow me to do what I need to do. Take care of my kids. Which they're still on. So, y'all are compassionate about John. Okay? I'm not compassionate about John.
Now they have to read the whole chapter. That's all these to know that they're going to read one of the chapters.
Like y'all might do right now. But what we fail to understand, just because you does not mean you cannot have respect. What I mean by that, you have a bunch of kids that whenever they you can call them candy, you can call them mean, you can call them whatever you want to how you want to categorize. The point is that they'll work for you.
No.
So how do you set it up?
So you divide it up. So
I'm
there's
sitting
15
while we
chapters
talk.
in class.
No, I'm exhausted.
And you do the first couple to get them what you want and get them started, and then at the end of the semester they're like, I don't know what school is about.
This is a
You already
process.
have your standard
It's
of
a
how you
sit-in.
do this, and you said I'll do that.
So,
But
okay, so here's what I so I
then
did.
you get to give it to them, and you're not on the
We were taking their money that they paid for to contract with the federal. I said, all right, great. The average of what it costs, about 6 cents.
You gotta get on your
Phone in there. Put it where you want to put it.
That's all right. I said, so you better get to
Wait a minute, I can't quite do it like you, but I can.
right now. So I said,
I can't quite do it like you.
what your average is about 700. Okay, that's with the high one, with the low one. I said, all right. So what we do is we just come in, hit it first, cut it far, right? Boom, chop it up. Afterwards, you have community organization, the club, schools, all that stuff. There to maintain for 10 months. Okay, and $60 a month. No, they had a partnership with Keep Houston Beautiful. They could give money to Keep Houston Beautiful. To pay the organization. So I'm giving you now $600 a month. So people are like, oh, what? $60 a month? That's not enough. Okay, if I tell you I cut $30 a month, okay, a 12,000 square foot lot, $30 a month cut low, edge, I can get $15 a month. I should be able to.
through communities. So that's your mechanism for,
Well, it may not be whatever nonprofit organization we can establish
right.
that. And which is it's BS because they started
You over there? No, no, Vice Mayor Pro Tem. Come on, no. You can go up there. Where I'm going? Come on.
No, you stay right there.
Can they get in the middle?
You can stay right there.
Come on, Martha.
Council. Okay.
You sure? Well, I can move. Because you are speaking. You are speaking. Okay.
Okay, let me say good afternoon to everyone, and I want to start off by acknowledging all of the council members who are present, the Mayor Pro Tem, Martin, Vice Mayor Pro Tem, Castek Tatum, Councilmember Evans Shabazz, Councilmember Kamen, Councilmember Davis, Councilmember Pollack, Councilmember Robinson, Councilmember Alcorn. Did I miss anyone? Councilmember Thomas. So a good, strong representation of city council members. Chief Osservator is here. Ray Hunt is here as well. So let me just start off by saying today is an important day for the city of Houston. In fact, it almost seems every day is an important day. And this has been an incredible week for the city. I want to thank the members of City Council for today passing a unanimous budget for 21. And let me tell you, this was the biggest budgetary shortfall that we had to fill. A lot of good conversation today. And so I do want to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of these council members for the work that they put in and the conversation that took place today, and for the passage of a unanimous budget. It is a balanced budget that meets the needs of the residents of Houston. And for the fifth year, Houston faced a shortfall, and this year in the amount of $169 million due to COVID-19 public health crisis, which created a decline in sales tax collection and oil and gas prices. But as a result of tight belting and hard choices and the use of money from the CARES Act, we were able to balance the budget without laying off or furloughing any City of Houston employees, returning the Economic Stabilization Fund, restoring the fund balance to over 8%, and moving forward on our major priorities. The approved 2021 $5.1 billion budget, $2.51 billion general fund budget, includes funding for our 5 police cadet classes, 4 fire department cadet classes, and adds back the $15 million to our rainy day fund, which is important since we are now in the midst of hurricane season. And we were able to do that by tapping into the $404 million in CARES Act funding. We can fund our parks, trash collections, libraries, and provide money to upgrade our drainage and streets. And the budget provides the service our residents expect and deserve. And so I want to thank everyone for their participation. Let me also say that today, over the past several weeks, in the aftermath of the death of George Floyd, while in the custody of Minneapolis police, people across the country and in the Houston area community have called for policing reform. And earlier this week, in fact last week, I announced that I was forming the Mayor's Task Force on Policing Reforms. I've also indicated, and what's been indicated, that the Committee over Public Health and Homeland Security, the City Council Committee, will be meeting next week with HPD, the chair of the Independent Oversight Board, I think even the District Attorney's Office as well, and starting those conversations as it relates to reform. But it is important that we take steps now in order to make the reforms, some of those reforms now, because it's important that we speak and act to the emergency of this situation. Also last week, 5 of our council members, African American council members to be exact, put forth a letter also voicing some concern, some reforms that need to take place, and also calling for the signing of an executive order. Today, in a few minutes, that is exactly what will take place, that I will be signing an executive order 1-67. And let me just cover some of the things that will be included, that are included in this executive order. It covers response to resistance, that officers shall use only the amount of objectively reasonable force necessary to successfully protect themselves or others, to effect an arrest, or to bring an incident under control when dealing with members of the community, suspects, or prisoners, even if under the circumstances applicable law would allow the use of greater force. It speaks to de-escalation. Officers shall use de-escalation techniques to gain voluntary compliance and seek to avoid or minimize use of physical force whenever practical. And de-escalation techniques should be continuously developed, updated, and made part of the continuing training delivered to all police officers by the Houston Police Department. Each officer should make clear the officer's intent to arrest or search a person and should identify himself or herself as a police officer before using force, unless the officer has an objectively reasonable belief that this information is already known by the subject or it is impractical to do so. With regards to the use of deadly force, prior to the use of deadly force, all police officers shall use appropriate de-escalation techniques that are reasonably likely to decrease the need for the police officer to use physical force. Exhaust all other reasonably available alternatives, such as, without limitation, issuing a verbal warning when possible prior to the use of deadly force. If de-escalation and all other reasonable means of reducing the conflict are not successful, the use of deadly force by means of a firearm is limited to those circumstances in which an officer has an objectively reasonable belief that the use of deadly force is necessary to protect the officer or others from imminent serious bodily injury or death. And police officers shall consider the immediate surroundings and the safety of uninvolved persons before using deadly force. With regards to shooting at a moving vehicle, a police officer is prohibited from discharging a firearm or soft impact weapon at a moving vehicle unless it is objectively necessary to protect the officer or others from imminent serious bodily injury or death. On notifications, in addition to notification requirements required by HPD's general orders, all uses of deadly force by police officers shall be reported to the Independent Police Oversight Board. Prohibited techniques. Police officers shall not use neck restraints or carotid artery holds, also known as chokeholds, whether by using an object or a body part, unless objectively necessary to prevent imminent serious bodily injury or death to the officer or others. Officers shall not place their knee, foot, or body weight on the neck of a suspect to control or contain the suspect's movement. With regards to no-knock warrants, police officers are prohibited from executing a no-knock warrant unless the warrant has been approved in writing by the HPD Chief of Police or his designee, the Chief of Police, and the warrant has been signed by a district court judge in accordance with HPD policy and procedure, and subject to the requirements of paragraphs 5.5.1, any no-knock warrant that may involve forcible entry of a building will be served by HPD's Special Weapons and Tactics Detail unless otherwise directed by the Chief of Police in writing. Body-worn cameras will be used by all officers who are members of the entry and perimeter team serving a no-knock warrant or participating in the execution of any such authorized warrant. With regards to duty to intercede, any police officer present and observing another police officer using force that is beyond that which is reasonable under the circumstances shall, when in position to do so, safely intercede to prevent the use of such force. Officers shall immediately report these observations to an off-duty supervisor.
a day where we can hold our heads high. I want to thank you, Mayor, for listening to council. I want to thank you for putting this executive order together today. And Vice Mayor Pro Tem Castex Tatum, she said this is just the first step. And this is the first step. We had several budget items to go through council today. Some were approved, such as the amendment with Councilmember Pollock that we're going to push forward and send it to legal to where we can have an transparency can take place, where our citizens can tap into us, into our system to see what's going on, how they can have real-time data of what's going on in our city. We hear the complaints, we get the phone calls on a daily basis, and it's a pleasure to be in a position to where we can actually see this change happen and to make this change occur. So thank you, Mayor, and thank you, colleagues.
The Chair of Public Safety, Councilman King.
Thank you, Mayor. It's a pleasure to work with you and all of our council colleagues. Over the past few weeks, we have already started to work towards reform, towards transparency, and to responding to what the citizens of Houston demand of us. We have heard over and over again the need to not only look at policing reform, but to also invest in the things that our communities desperately need, like mental health and other types of assistance, and we will continue to work towards that. We do have a lot of work to do. We'll be starting that work next week. We'll be doing markups, researching policies. Please, as citizens, continue to send us your thoughts and ideas. We are listening to you, and we will continue to work alongside HPD in partnership to that end. We appreciate you. We're here, and we're ready to get to work.
Councilman Pollock.
Thank you, Mayor. Today is a great day. Many of us feel your frustration. We feel your heartache. We feel that not just because of George Floyd, but the many, many names and lives that came before him. And it's important that we stand here today collectively because this is the work that we have been putting towards for some time now. And as mentioned before, we met with leadership with HPD a few weeks ago. And after the death of George Floyd, we knew we had to come together and really push for meaningful reform. And we put forth a letter to the mayor and to the public detailing various reforms that we thought were necessary. And the feedback that we received was, that's great, but some of the things you all can do right now. You don't have to have a task force, or you don't have to go through a committee hearing. Some of this is just long overdue, and it's common sense. And I want to thank the mayor for listening to our concerns and those reforms. And I want to thank the police union. I want to thank HPD. I want to thank Councilmember Tiffany Thomas for taking the lead on writing that letter, and for you hearing this, and for you hearing the voices of the people, because that's truly important. The reforms that we came up with were not just our own, but they were yours. We heard directly from you. And today is a significant day because many of the things that were never written policy, although they may have been done, it wasn't written policy, now will be. And so thank the public for reaching out to us, give us your issues, your concerns, your reforms. Thank you, Mayor, for your leadership. This is a great day.
Councilmember Tiffany Thomas.
I echo the sentiments of my colleagues, but I also want to be very clear that beyond this being a historical moment, this is about action. And this is about a city demonstrating our commitment to that action. And to be very frank, we had to compromise on what the reforms were. So we were ready for very bold ideas and bold action. But we understand that as a collective body and in a mayor form of government, we must operate within the system that we are elected to make change. And we're committed to that. So I just want to thank my colleagues, and I want to thank the people who are willing to give us an opportunity to work through these measures, because this can't happen overnight. This is not something we can do in 2 weeks. We are talking about changing systems that have operated for decades, for centuries. So I just want to reiterate that. And while you may critique us from the outside, know that on the inside we're still holding your trust, We're still listening to you, and we will still keep the voices of the public as our #1 priority. Thank you.
Councilmember Cisneros.
This is such an historic moment, and I wanted to just say that it goes beyond talking about police. It really deals with the systemic racism that has existed and been institutionalized as part of our culture. And changing values, changing deeply held beliefs, changing culture is not an easy thing. But I am so hopeful, so optimistic, so inspired by how many people have come together, have stood up, who have just been so engaged and vocal and connected with us. It's the most optimistic I've ever felt about this issue, and I just feel like we are at a turning point. This is a different day. You know that George Floyd's death is different. There have been a long history of brutal murders of Black people and marginalized people, and this is different. And I'm very excited about our future. There is a path forward to a better day tomorrow if we make the right steps, and I believe that we here in Houston are doing that. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Robinson.
Thank you, Mayor Turner. Thank you, colleagues. A day of pride for all of us, I believe, in this great month of Pride awareness. And while Black suffering in our neighborhoods and communities are very much on our minds, what I saw today on Council, Mayor, with collaboration between all council members and us working together for a better day for Houston makes me very proud to represent the city. I am in all of this. We have got a tremendous amount of work going forward, but at the same time, I know we're up to the task, and with your leadership and good work from the council, and I would like to thank Chief Acevedo as well as Ray Hunt and the Police Officers Union. Our rank and file, we're looking out for you while we are looking out for the people of Houston. And this can be done in balance, and we can do it together. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Evan Shabazz.
Thank you, Mayor. My heart is still heavy because I'm still walking with the Floyd family. He was a member of my community at one point. But I am encouraged. This is a very long day, but I'm encouraged, and I'm very appreciative of my colleagues stepping forward for us to give the letter to the mayor. And I'm even more elated that the mayor responded, and he responded immediately. We are committed to this being more than just a moment. We are committed to it being a movement in the right direction. So hopefully the community will trust us and know that we have our best interests, not just yours, because we all represent families that have been greatly impacted or could be. So be mindful that we carry this, and we may keep smiles on our faces under these masks, but we are carrying very heavy burdens, because trust me, when we hear that members of our community have been killed, it is a very heavy burden. So just thank you to the mayor, thank you to all the Chief Acevedo, Mr. Hunt, and all of my colleagues, because this is just the beginning, and I want everybody to understand that it's the input of the community that we need. We sit in those seats to represent. I hear a lot that, oh, we didn't get a chance to come to the table. We didn't get any input. Well, I am committed that that's not gonna happen on my watch. You will get a voice. I will listen. And with that, we will come out with the best reforms. Not some that were just put in an emotional list, but certainly those that will be substantive and full of substantive and real conversations and reforms for the people of Houston. So thank you so very much.
Councilmember Sally Alcorn.
Thank you, Mayor, and let me just say it's an honor to stand here with my colleagues, and I commend all of you who have pushed these reforms who have asked the mayor for his executive order. The mayor, I heard you say that you reward a peaceful protest with action, and so that's what we're seeing here today. We're acting on what we've been hearing, and there's a lot more work to do. I'm honored to be in this room with my wonderful colleagues. I can tell that everybody's put a great deal of thought into what reforms are coming, and there will be a great deal more work to do. I have 4 kids in their 20s. They've been in my ear all week. The young people will save us. They are the voice of the future. I don't want my kids to be having this conversation in 40 more years. So for my kids, for everyone, I'm so proud to be here, and thank you, Mayor, for this action.
And let me just say, this is not the end. These are steps that have been put in place right now to address, to do some immediate steps, and we still welcome the citizen input. Let me also
family of Mr. Floyd. And so I hope this is just a first step, because when we have these good policies, what we have is trust. We build trust, and with building trust, we build better communities, and with better communities, we create safety for the people we serve and the men and women that we're privileged to lead. So we look forward, Mayor, to the continued conversation, because I think one of the things that we have not done a good job as a department is highlighting the things that we are doing right. The programs that we have where we're a national model for the nation. And I think that education can't be left and to happenstance. It has to be intentional. And I look forward, Mayor, thanks to you and the commission that you put forward, to not just highlight the things that we are doing right, that are national models, but also to identify the things that we can do better. So congratulations. It's my honor, my privilege to serve with you in this council. And to this council, thank you for being involved and engaged and holding our feet to the fire. Thank you.
Okay, we'll take a few questions if anyone should have them.
Mayor, can you just talk a little bit about how this executive order came to be in the sense, last week you announced the task force. That was also after the protests. Was there some kind of meeting this weekend or other event that convinced you to take more immediate changes?
Well, I would tell you, announced the task force and that will be citizen-driven, but it does take time. And what we were also hearing is that people wanted to see some things happen in a more immediate way. The council members, 5 of the African-American council members wrote the letter, and I got that and talked with them as well. And they thought it was also important. And then, the marchers, the demonstrators, the protesters, they wanted things. And then there was the push for 8 can't wait. So all of that was taking place. So it is important for us to do some things from an immediate point of view, while the task force is put together and they start their work, while the city council committee process is doing this work. These are some of the things that we can put in place right now as all the other avenues of reform take place.
And then a couple of other kind of things that have been gaining traction, the idea of giving the oversight board subpoena power, and also the police department releasing its narcotics audit. I know the task force will probably look at these things, but are those two things that you personally support? Those
are things that require much more in-depth review and are more appropriate for the task force and the committee hearings, more or less, to drill down and to explore, to vet in a much more thorough fashion. And so we're leaving those items for the task force and the committee process.
Do you support them personally, or you're leaving that up to the task force?
I'm leaving things up to the task force. I think what is important, what the protesters and others have said, they want us to listen and not just to be doing things that we think is more, quote unquote, politically expedient. And so I think it is important for us to listen, to allow them to weigh in on what additional reforms may be required. And so we're going to do just that.
The Harris County DA has dropped charges against 600 people who were arrested at protests. And she says that these arrests were basically just simple civil disobedience. And so I'd like to know if you think that the charges against those 600 people, were they justified? Do you think that they were unnecessary?
I'm not the DA. I'll let the DA speak to that, and I think she has.
HPD arrests. So do you think that those arrests were necessary? Do you think they were justified?
From all indications, they were out there. If they felt the need to arrest individuals, then from a presumption point of view, I would say yes. Now, in the legal process, a lot of steps will take place, and if the DA drew the conclusion that the charges should be dropped, that's the DA's call. Okay.
Mayor, at the signing of this, prior to yesterday, the union put out a statement pointing out that chokeholds have never been part of the police department's general order. That even though you clarified the language here, it was never something that was taught in the academy. At the same time, the Black Lives Matter folks, they had a protest this morning outside City Hall. So you have a lot of people saying, this looks great, it makes one feel good, but when you're looking at the actual policy, it doesn't actually change a lot of things. What do you say to that criticism?
Well, but if they're saying if it wasn't in policy, it is now in policy. And black lives do matter. But you can't, if you're saying it doesn't exist, and what I was hearing, make it a part of the policy. Well, we've made it a part of the policy. People were saying, we're looking at the 8 can't wait, and we don't check, when we're looking at the city of Houston, we can't check the box. Well, you can now check the box. So if you're saying we should put it as a part of the policy, at the highest level, it doesn't get any higher than my executive order as the mayor of the city of Houston. So we are making it very clear. The policy in the city of Houston is that chokeholds, strangleholds are not allowed. That anytime you're using deadly force, it needs to be reported. Okay? That if an officer sees another officer violating policy or doing something wrong, you have a duty to intercede. And that where you can give a verbal warning, where practical, possible, before using deadly force, do that. You're expected to do that. When it comes to confronting people, you have a duty to try to move to de-escalate. Okay? With respect to moving vehicles, you can't be firing at moving vehicles unless it's imminent body injury to yourself or someone else. Those are the things that people have said. We want to be in your policy. And we're doing that.
Councilmember Leticia Plummer, as you know, she had a whole long list. She's not here, but I guess she said Rome wasn't built in a day. What do you say to all her amendments that were soundly defeated? Was it all bad ideas, going too far, not too fast? What do you say about that?
Well, part of that was in her amendment initially were the things included in 8 can't wait. They are now in the executive order. We were listening. On the CAHOOTS program, the council members weren't saying no to that. We said that we needed to vet it. We've looked into the CAHOOTS program in Oregon. You know, there are 2 vans. City of Houston is much, much bigger. So we're not saying no. I do know that HPD already has a crisis intervention program, and we've had it in place since 1998. Now, can we improve it? Should we expand it? Yes. But let me also say this. We have asked police department and police officers to do a lot. We asked them to deal with people with mental behavioral health issues. We asked them to deal with people with substance abuse. We asked them to deal with people who are homeless on our streets. We have asked them to do a lot. And what I've said to people in our business community is that we need to be doing more of those things and not asking our police officers to try to be the social representatives on everything. But you know one of the reasons why? Because historically, in this city, in this state, in this country, it's been easier to get dollars for law enforcement than to get dollars for those who are homeless on our streets, or to get dollars for investments in communities that have been underserved and under-resourced. And that needs to change. And when we invest in these communities, then we won't have to ask police officers to do all of these other things. So, quite frankly, police are getting hit and criticized for things that the greater society has not been willing to do. And that's unfair. And so what I've said to people in our business community and others, it is time to invest in communities where we are lifting people up and providing kids with opportunities in these communities that have been underserved. And if we make the investment in these communities, then we don't have to spend so much with police, because we're meeting the needs of people in these communities. But society's priorities need to shift, okay? And from my vantage point, police have we've been criticizing them, but the system has asked them to do more than they should be asked to do. And that needs to change. That needs to change. And that's what I'm hoping that the business community and others in this city will help us to do. Let's invest in things, in communities and neighborhoods, to give them, so that every neighborhood is the neighborhood of opportunity and inspiration. And if we do that, we won't have to invest so much in law enforcement.
Mr. Mayor, some community activists are saying the reform measures don't go far enough. What would your response to them be?
We're not saying that we are done. Look, if we don't do anything, then people criticize us for not doing anything. So this is not the end. This is just a step in moving forward. We still need to hear we want to hear from people in all of these city council districts and throughout the city of Houston. And we want to provide forums for them to give their ideas, their thoughts. And this is a work in progress. Nobody is taking a victory lap. Okay? We're not taking a victory lap. This is many different laps. Okay? You cannot reverse systemic neglect and racism in one day by the stroke of one pen. Systemic racism is embedded, and you've got to work intentionally to dig it out. It's not done just by signing a document, but at this moment, that's what we can do, and that's what we are doing. But we're not done. We're not done. And so that's what I would say. Nobody is taking a victory lap. We're simply saying we have taken another significant step, and there are more steps that need to be taken to really advance the cause of justice.
Just to expand on that POU
comment that I think is confusing some people is which of these tactics today were already part of police officer training, whether they were written in the policy or not? That might be a question for Osvaldo.
Chief. And I certainly want to acknowledge Ray Hunt at the union for being present because they have been just an excellent partner with us. So thank you so very much.
You know, I have to express a little frustration because I don't think people understand what's happened here today. I served in Austin for 9.5 years. I put things in place, and some of those things after I left were changed. What's happened here today, regardless of whether it's existing or it's new, is that all the rules have just been read, all the requirements that have been signed by this mayor cannot be changed by a future chief without coming through the mayor's office, cannot be changed in the dark, cannot be changed overnight. It has to come back to this mayor or the next mayor or 10 mayors from now. It requires action that will be public, and the document will be filed for everyone to see. So I think this is a huge watershed moment, and I think if you look at the city of Houston, this is a first for this city. And I think that once again, we're leading the nation in terms of how we make things better. And for that, Mayor, I want to say again, you know, people that want to find fault will always find fault. But I like to think that we need to look at the glasses half full, and we're on our way to filling it all the way to the top with accountability here in the city of Houston.
Let me thank you all so very, very much. And then did I give the numbers on COVID-19? It's 160. I'm sorry, but there are over 160 new cases been reported on COVID-19 today, 3 additional deaths. The number goes up to 146. And so the number of COVID positive cases in the city continues to tick up. So just bear that in mind. Please continue to wear your mask, engage in social distancing, and engage in proper hygiene. Thank you all so very much.